Hi, sixth graders. So here we are again today. We're going to continue reading from the Weston game. And I know that we are further than this. We've read into chapter 5, but we are going to go back and reread because in this first quadrant, we read really slowly because we go back and we reread because we want to get all the important details. And so we're going to go back to a section of the book and look at it again. And remember, probably about a week ago, we started looking at events that were important. We said good readers watch for important events as they're reading. So we're going to be taking notes on that page in your reader's notebook again about important events. So it looks like this. It's labeled important events, and you already should have these 5 important events on there. We said that Barney Northrup rents apartments in Sunset Towers to 6 chosen tenants. We said that smoke is seen coming from the chimney of the Westinghouse after someone with a limp is seen going in. We said the turtle is dared to go into the Westinghouse, Turtles dared to go into the Westinghouse on Halloween night. We said that Turtle sees a corpse in the Westinghouse. And then we said that a newspaper reports that Sam Westing was found dead, and there's no mention of how the body was found. So those are some really important events. Let me see. If you don't have those, I'll move this forward. If you don't have those written down in your reader's notebook underneath the important events, you should make sure that you copy those down. Okay? All right. So another thing that we have been talking about is that good readers focus on important characters while we're reading. And so yesterday you took notes on Samuel W. Westing, and we wrote down some important things about his character. And then we also wrote down some important events that happened in his life, and we put those on that timeline. So you should have some important facts about Samuel Westing in your notebook, about his character, his personality, and then you should have a page with a timeline of Sam Westing's life, and we did that yesterday, and you should cut that out if you're able to, and either glue or tape into your reader's notebook. So you have those notes on important events in Sam Westing's life. Okay? So we have been learning that good readers focus on important characters while reading. And today, I'm going to teach you that good readers continue to think about what events are important as they're reading. So they don't just stop in the beginning, they keep thinking about what events are important, and then they make logical predictions based on those events. Okay? So you should have your notebook open to important events. You should have all of these important events written down. And then we're going to continue. We're going to look back, reread. So you should have your book with you as well. If you don't have it, pause the video and go get it, because I want you to follow along. Okay, so we're going to go back and reread, and we're going to keep track of the important events in this first quadrant. And we're going to create a list of more important events that happen, and then you're going to copy. I'm going to put it up here. I'm going to erase this, and then you guys copy the important events in your notebook underneath this important event. We will actually start with number 6. I'll put it down here. We're not there yet, but we'll get there. We're going to continue on this list. Okay? And you're going to copy it down into your notebook. So let's go back to page 21. Okay? And we are at the very bottom of the page, the very last line on the page for page 21. it says, by the time the sun had set, oh, I'm sorry, that's not where we're starting. We are going to start actually right underneath the dots. Okay, right underneath the dots where it says, at noon, the 62-year-old delivery boy began his rounds. He had 16 letters to deliver from E.J. Plum, attorney at law. Otis Amber knew what the letter said because one was addressed to him. Here's what it said. As a named beneficiary in the estate of Samuel W. Westing, your attendance is required in the South Library of the Westing House tomorrow at 4 p.m. for the reading of the will. Means old man Westing left you some money, he explained. Just sign this receipt here. What do you mean? What does position mean? It means position, like a job. Most receipts have that to make sure the right person gets the right letter. Grace Windsor Wexler wrote housewife, crossed it out, wrote decorator, crossed it out, and wrote heiress. Then she wanted to know who else, how many, how much. I ain't allowed to say nothing. The other heirs were too stunned by the unexpected legacy to bother him with questions. Madam Who marked an X, and her husband filled in her name and position. Theo wanted to sign the receipt for his brother, but Chris insisted on doing it himself. Slowly, taking great pains, he wrote Christos Theodorakis, birdwatcher. By the time the sun had set, behind the Sunset Towers parking lot, Otis Amber, deliverer, had completed his rounds. Okay, we're going to stop right there, and we're going to think about what we thought the important events were in this section. Actually, I'm going to model it for you. So when the book said that 16 letters were delivered to beneficiaries of Sam Westing's estate, I was thinking that this was important because the 16 beneficiaries will unexpectedly receive some of Sam Westing's $200 million. Pretty important. Okay, so we are going to add this event to our list. Okay? So, Otis Amber, he's the delivery boy, right? The 62-year-old delivery boy. Otis Amber. He delivers 16 letters to beneficiaries of Sam Westing's will. Okay, Otis Amber delivers 16 letters to the beneficiaries of Sam Westing's will. So that's pretty important. Go ahead and write that down underneath the important events in your reader's notebook. Okay, and then we are going to continue reading. So we are going to get past where we left off last Wednesday. Okay, so we're on chapter 5, page 22. If you didn't get this written down yet, you can pause the video and finish your writing it down. So you should be following along. We're on page 22, chapter 5 of the Westing game. So this is titled 16 Errors. All right. The marbled sky lay heavy on the gray Great Lake when Grace Windsor Wexler parked her car in the Westing driveway and strode up the walk ahead of her daughters. Her husband had refused to come. But no matter. Recalling family gossip about a rich uncle, maybe it was a great uncle anyway, his name was Sam, Grace had convinced herself that she was the rightful heir. Jake was Jewish, so he could not possibly be related to Samuel W. Westing. I can't imagine what became of my silver cross, she said, fingering the gold link necklace under her mink stole as she paused to appraise the big house. You know, Angela, we could have the wedding right here. Turtle, where are you wandering off to now? The letter said, never mind. Turtle preferred not to explain how she knew the library could be entered from the French doors on the lawn. The front door was opened by Crow. Although the Sunset Towers cleaning woman always wore black, here it reminded Grace Wexler to dab at her eyes with a lace handkerchief. This was a house of mourning. The silent Crow helped Angela with her coat and nodded approval of her blue velvet dress with white collar and cuffs. I'll keep my furs with me, Grace said. She did not want to be taken for one of the poor relatives. Seems rather chilly in here. Turtle, too, complained of the chill, but her mother tugged off her coat to reveal a fluffy, roughly pink party dress 2 sizes too large and 4 inches too long. It was one of Angela's hand-me-downs. Please sit anywhere, the lawyer said without glancing from the envelopes he was sorting at the head of the long library table. Mrs. Wexler took the chair to his right and motioned to her favorite. Angela sat down next to her mother, removed a trousseau towel from her large tapestry bag, and took up embroidering the monogram D. Slumped in the third chair, Turtle pretended she had never seen this paneled library with its bare and dusty shelves. Suddenly, she sat up with a start. An open coffin draped in bunting rested on a raised platform at the far corner of the room. In it lay the dead man, looking exactly as she had found him, except now he was dressed in the costume of Uncle Sam, including the tall hat. Between the waxy hands folded across his chest lay her mother's silver cross. Grace Wexler was too busy greeting the next heir to notice. Why, Dr. D, I had no idea you'd be here, but of course, you'll soon be a member of the family. Come, sit next to your bride-to-be. Turtle, you'll have to move down. D. Denton Deer, always in a hurry, brushed a quick kiss on Angela's cheek. He was still wearing his hospital whites. I didn't know this was a pajama party, Turtle said, relinquishing her chair and stomping to the far end of the table. The next heir, short and round, entered timidly, her lips pressed together in an impish smile that curved up to what must be pointed ears under her straight-cut, steely hair. Hello, Mrs. Baumbach, Angela said. I don't think you've met my fiancé, Denton Deer. You're a lucky man, Mr. Deer. Dr. Deer, Mrs. Wexler corrected her, puzzled by the dressmaker's presence. Yes, of course, I'm so sorry. Sensing that she was unwelcome at this end of the room, Flora Baumbach walked on. Hi, mind if I sit next to you? I promise not to pull your braid. That's okay. Turtle was hunched over the table, her small chin resting between her crossed arms. From there, she could see everything except the coffin. Grace Wexler dismissed the next heir with an audible tongue click. That distasteful little man didn't even have the sense to remove his silly aviator's cap. And what in heaven's name was he doing here? The delivery boy shouted, "Let's give a cheer! Otis Amber is here!" Turtle laughed. Flora Baumbach tittered, and Grace Wexler again clicked her tongue. Doug Hu and his father entered silently, but Sandy gave a hearty hi and a cheerful wave. He wore his doorman's uniform, but unlike Otis Amber, carried his hat in his hand. Grace Windsor Wexler was no longer surprised at the odd assortment of heirs. Household workers, all or former employees, she decided. The rich always reward servants in their wills, and her Uncle Sam was a generous man. "Aren't your parents coming?" she asked the older Theodorakis boy as he wheeled his brother into the library. "They weren't invited," Theo replied. "It's no," Chris announced. "What did he say?" "He said it's snowing," Theo and Flora Baumbach explained at the same time. The heirs watched helplessly as the invalid's thin frame was suddenly torn and twisted by convulsions. Only the dressmaker rushed to his side. I know, she simpered. "You were trying to tell us about the itsy-bitsy snowflings." Theo moved her way. "My brother is not an infant, and he's not retarded, so please, no more baby talk." Blinking away tears, Flora Baumbach returned to her seat, the elfin smile still planted on her pained face. Some stared at the afflicted child with morbid fascination, but most turned away. They didn't want to see. "Pyramidal tract involvement," Denton Deer whispered, trying to impress Angela with his diagnosis. Angela, her face a mirror to the boy's suffering, grabbed her tapestry bag and hurried out of the room. "Why, hello, Judge Ford." Proud of her liberalism, Grace Windsor Wexler stood and leaned over the table to shake the black woman's hand. She must be here in some legal capacity, or maybe her mother was a household maid. But of one thing Grace was certain: J.J. Ford could no more be related to Sam W. Westing than Mr. Who. "Can't we get started?" Mr. Who asked, hoping to get back in time to watch the football game on television. "I must return to my restaurant," he announced loudly. "Sunday is our busy day, but we are still accepting reservations. Shin Who's restaurant on the 5th floor of Sunset Towers, specializing in—" Doug tugged at his father's sleeve. "Not here, Dad. Not in front of the dead." "What dead?" Mr. Who had not noticed the open coffin. Now he did. "Oh." The lawyer explained that several heirs had not yet arrived. "My wife is not coming," said Mr. Who. Grace said, "Dr. Wexler was called away on an emergency operation." "An emergency Packers game in Green Bay," Turtle confided to Flora Baumbach, who scrunched up her shoulders and tittered behind a plump hand. "Then we are still waiting for one? No, 2 more, the lawyer said, fumbling with his papers, his hands shaking under the strict scrutiny of the judge. Judge Ford had recognized E.J. Plum. Several months ago, he had argued before her court, bumbling to the point of incompetence. Why, she wondered, was a young, inexperienced attorney chosen to handle an estate of such importance? Come to think of it, what was she doing here? Curiosity? Perhaps, but what about the rest of them, the other tenants of Sunset Towers? Don't anticipate Josie Joe. Wait for Sam Westing to make the first move. She's talking to herself there. Light footsteps were heard in the hall. It was only Angela who blushed and, hugging her tapestry bag close to her, returned to her seat. The heirs waited. Some chatted with neighbors. Some looked up at the gilt ceiling. Some studied the pattern of the oriental rug. Judge Ford stared at the table, at Theodorakis' hand. A calloused hand, a healed cut, a shiny slash of a burn on the deep bronze skin. She lowered her hands to her lap. His Greek skin was darker than her black skin. Thump, thump, thump. Someone was coming. Or were there 2 of them? In came Crow, eyes lowered. Without a word, she sat down next to Otis Amber. A dark cloud passed from her face as she eased off a tight shoe under the table. Thump, thump, thump. The last expected heir arrived. Hello, everybody. Sorry I'm late. I haven't quite adjusted to this. Seidel Pulaski waved a gaily painted crutch in the air, tottered, and set it down quickly with another thump. This crutch. Crutch. What a horrible word. but I guess I'll have to get used to it. She pursed her bright red mouth, painted to a fullness beyond the narrow line of her lips, trying to suppress a smile of triumph. Everyone was staring. She knew they would notice. "What happened, Pulaski?" Otis Amber asked. "Did you pull Turtle's braid again?" "More likely she visited Wexler the foot butcher," Sandy suggested. Seidel was pleased to hear someone come to her defense with a loud click of the tongue. She had not even blinked a false eyelash at those offensive remarks. "Poise, they call it." "It's really nothing," she reported bravely. "Just some sort of wasting disease. But pity me not. I shall live out my remaining time enjoying each precious day to the full." Thump, thump, thump. The secretary kept to the side of the room, avoiding the oriental rug that might cushion the thump of her purple-striped crutch. As she made her way to the end of the table, she avoided the rug as she made her way to the end of the table. Her exaggerated hips were even more exaggerated by the wavy stripes of white on her purple dress. Purple waves, Turtle thought. Denton Deer almost fell off his chair, leaning back to follow this most unusual case. First, she favored her left leg, then her right leg. "What is it?" whispered Mrs. Wexler. The intern did not have the least notion, but he had to say something. "Traveling sporadic myositis," he pronounced quickly and glanced at Angela. Her eyes remained on her embroidery. The lawyer stood, documents in hand, and cleared his throat several times. Grace Windsor Wexler, her chin tilted in the regal poise of an heiress, gave him her full attention. "1 minute, please." Seidel Pulaski propped her purple and white striped crutch against the table, then removed a shorthand pad and pencil from her handbag. "Thank you for waiting. You may begin." All right, we're going to stop there for a minute because there were some important events. And we're thinking what events in this part were important. So think about that for a minute. I'm going to erase number 1 up here. And we are going to make that number 7. So we are continuing our list. I'm going to try the lights again. Is it any better? Okay, and here what was important is all of the beneficiaries gather at the Westinghouse to hear the reading of the will. Okay? It's kind of a lot more detail, but in summary, that's what happened. Okay? So the beneficiaries gather at the Westinghouse to hear the reading of the will. So copy this down. Okay, I'm actually going to go ahead and erase 2, 3, 4, and 5. So that we can write down more important events. So write that down. The beneficiaries gather at the Westinghouse to hear the reading of the will. If you need to pause so that you can get that written down, go ahead, but then we are going to continue reading. All right, so we are on page 27, the beginning of chapter 6, that says the Westing Will. My name, the young lawyer began, is Edgar Jennings Plum. Although I never had the honor of meeting Samuel W. Westing, for some reason yet unexplained, I was appointed executor of this will found adjacent to the body of the deceased. Let me assure you that I have examined the documents at hand as thoroughly as possible in the short time available. I have verified the signatures to be those of Samuel W. Westing and his two witnesses, Julian R. Eastman, President and Chief Executive Officer of Westing Paper Products Corporation, and Sidney Sykes, M.D., Coroner of Westing County. Although the will you are about to hear may seem eccentric, I pledge my good name and reputation on its legality. Breathless with suspense, the heirs stared pop-eyed at Edgar Jennings Plum, who now coughed into his fist, now cleared his throat, now rustled papers, and now at last began to read from the Westing will. I, Samuel W. Westing, resident of Westing County in the fair state of Wisconsin, in the great and glorious United States of America, being of sound mind and memory, do hereby declare this to be my last will and testament. First, I returned to live among my friends and my enemies. I came home to seek my heir, aware that in doing so, I faced death. And so I did. Today, I have gathered together my nearest and dearest, my 16 nieces and nephews. What? Sit down, Grace Windsor Wexler. The lawyer stammered in apology to the still standing woman. I was only reading. Those are Mr. Westing's words. If it's any comfort to you, Mrs. Wexler, Judge Ford remarked with biting dignity, I am just as appalled by our purported relationship. Oh, I didn't mean. Hey, Angela, Turtle called the length of the table. It's against the law to marry that doctor-to-be. He's your cousin. D. Dententier, patting Angela's hand in his best bedside manner, pricked his finger on her embroidery needle. I can't tell who said what with this chatter, Seidel Pulaski complained. Would you read that again, Mr. Lawyer? Today, I have gathered together my nearest and dearest, my 16 nieces and nephews. Sit down, Grace Windsor Wexler, to view the body of your Uncle Sam for the last time. Tomorrow, its ashes will be scattered to the four winds. Second, I, Samuel W. Westing, hereby swear that I did not die of natural causes. My life was taken from me by one of you. All right, let's stop there. Now, what is an important event there? Well, obviously, we find out some really shocking and important news, right? And that is that Sam Westing states that his life was taken from him by one of the beneficiaries. So we are going to put that up here. So Sam Westing's will states that his life was taken from him by one of his beneficiaries. Well, that is pretty important, right? Okay, copy that down. And then also what I want you to do is I want you to circle this event. because this event actually identifies one of the major problems in the story. So I want you to circle it and I want you to label it problem. Okay, so that is one of the problems in the story. All right, we are going to continue reading. If you need to pause the video to copy down that note, go ahead and do so. Oh, Chris's arm flailed the air. His accusing finger pointed here. No, there. It pointed everywhere. His exaggerated motions acted out the confusion shared by all. But one of the heirs, as they looked around at the stunned faces of their neighbors to confirm what they heard. Rereading her notes, Seidel Pulaski now uttered a small shriek. Eek! Murder? Does that mean Westing was murdered? Sandy asked the heir on his left. Crow turned away in silence. Does that mean murder? He asked the heir on his right. Murder? Of course it means murder. Sam Westing was murdered, Mr. Who replied. Either that, or he ate once too often in that greasy spoon coffee shop. Theo resented Who's slur on the family business. It was murder, all right, and the will says the murderer is one of us. He glared at the restaurant owner. Have the police been notified of the charge? Judge Ford asked the lawyer. Plum shrugged. I presume they will perform an autopsy. The judge shook her head in dismay. Autopsy? Westing was already embalmed. Tomorrow he would be cremated. The police are helpless. The culprit is far too cunning to be apprehended for this dastardly deed. Oh my! Flora Baumbach clapped a hand to her mouth on hearing dastardly. First murder, now a swear word. I alone know the name. Now it is up to you. Cast out the sinner. Let the guilty rise and confess. Amen, said Crow. Third, who among you is worthy to be the Westing heir? Help me. My soul shall roam restlessly until that one is found. The estate is at the crossroads. The heir who wins the windfall will be the one who finds the ashes, the doorman shouted. Some tittered to relieve the unbearable tension. Some cast him a reproachful glance. Grace Wexler clicked her tongue, and Seidel Pulaski shh. It was just a joke, Sandy tried to explain. You know, ashes scattered to the winds, so the one who wins the windfall gets... Oh, never mind. Fourth, hail to thee, O land of opportunity. You have made me the son of poor immigrants, rich, powerful, and respected. So take stock in America, my heirs, and sing in praise of this generous land. You too may strike it rich, who dares to play the Westing game. Game? What game? Turtle wanted to know. No matter, Judge Ford said, rising to leave. This is either a cruel trick or the man was insane. Fifth, sit down, Your Honor, and read the letter this brilliant young attorney will now hand over to you. It was uncanny. Several heads turned toward the coffin, but Westing's eyes were shut forever. The brilliant young attorney fumbled through a stack of papers, felt his pockets, and finally found the letter in his briefcase. Aren't you going to open it? Theo asked as the judge resumed her seat and put the sealed envelope in her purse. No need. Sam Westing could afford to buy a dozen certificates of sanity. The poor are crazy, the rich just eccentric, Mr. Who said bitterly. Are you implying, sir, that the medical profession is corrupt? Denton Deer challenged. Shh. Sixth, before you proceed to the game room, there will be 1 minute of silent prayer for your good old Uncle Sam. Flora Baumbach was the only heir to cry. Crow was the only one to pray. By the time Seidel Pulaski could assume a pose of reverence, the minute was up. All right, Chapter 7, The Westing Game. 8 card tables, each with 2 chairs, were arranged in the center of the game room. Sports equipment lined the walls: hunting rifles, ping pong paddles, billiard cues, a full rack, Turtle noticed. Bows and arrows, darts, bats, rackets, all looked like possible murder weapons to the jittery heirs who were waiting to be told where to sit. Theo wandered over to the chess table to admire the finely carved pieces. Someone had moved a white pawn. Okay, he'll play along. Theo defended the opening with a black knight. On hearing Plum's throat-clearing signal, Seidel Pulaski switched the painted crutch to her left armpit and flipped to a fresh page in her notebook. Shh. The 7th, and now, dear friends, relatives, and enemies, the Westing game begins. The rules are simple. Number of players, 16, divided into 8 pairs. Each pair will receive $10,000. Each pair will receive 1 set of clues. Forfeits: if any player drops out, the partner must leave the game. The pair must return the money. Absent pairs forfeit the $10,000. Their clues will be held until the next session. Players will be given 2 days' notice of the next session. Each pair may then give 1 answer. Object of the game: to win. Did you hear that, Crow? Otis Amber said excitedly. $10,000. Now aren't you glad I made you come, huh? Shh! That was Turtle. The object of the game was to win, and she wanted to win. Eighth, yes, the heirs will now be paired. When called, go to the assigned table. Your name and position will be read on the sign as signed on the receipt. It will be up to the other players to discover who you really are. All right, we are going to stop right there and think about what are any important events that happened in this section. Okay, so what do you think? What do you think are important events? Well, first of all, the beneficiaries have to play a game, right? That's what the will is stating. So, number 9 is going to be Sam Westing's will asks that each beneficiary participate in playing the Westing game. Okay. Okay, so they all have to play a game. And then number 10, it's going to be up to each person to discover who the players really are. Okay. Okay, And that last one, it will be up to each person to discover who the players really are. That's something that has to be figured out, right? So we are going to call that a problem. So we're going to circle that one as well. And we are also going to label that the problem. Okay? We're going to stop reading there for today. So we have the important events that we have from today's reading were the beneficiaries gather at the Westing house to hear the reading of the will. Sam Westing's will states that his life was taken from him by one of the beneficiaries, and we labeled this as a problem, right, that needs to be figured out. Number 9, Sam Westing's will asks that each beneficiary participate in playing the Westing game. And number 10, it will be up to each person to discover who the players really are. And that also is a problem that needs to be figured out. Okay, so based on all of these important events, what are you predicting about the Westing game? Think about it. Thanks. We'll see you tomorrow.